Hello, I'm Denise Pratt. Welcome to our Table Talk Unplugged. It's a show produced by the Communications section of the Ministry of Education Technical and Vocational Training. Here we feature key education stakeholders as we discuss issues that are critical to the academic sector. Well, we are now 2 years into the COVID-19 pandemic, and all of our schools throughout the country will soon be returning to the face-to-face model of instructional delivery. Thousands of our students will enter the brick and mortar classroom. However, many of our parents have made the decision to embrace an alternative form of instructional delivery, such as homeschooling. Additionally, some parents have opted to enroll their children in small independent settings. Well, whatever learning model they have settled on, the fact still remains that all children throughout this country are entitled to a quality education. Today, our Director of Education, Mr. Marcellus Taylor, is here to share his overview of education's instructional protocols in this COVID-19 environment. Welcome, Director Taylor.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Yes, it's a pleasure to have you here. You know, Director Taylor, many of our parents are feeling a bit relieved that our students are resuming this face-to-face instruction, and rightly so, because for many it's the preferred method of instruction. But many of them have also opted, like I said earlier, to consider homeschooling their children or to put them in other settings, maybe, you know, with maybe 2 or 3 other children, these small independent learning institutions. How do you feel about that?
Well, you know, Ms. Pratt, we are about people receiving a quality education, and part of an education being of good quality is its suitability to the individual. And so, as far as we're concerned, the specific modality, the specific location is not the issue. It's what that student gets exposed to and how that student engages. So from 2016, for instance, we established a unit to deal with homeschooling, precisely because we have the view that there are some people who are going to prefer their children to be taught in the home environment. Of course, the ministry has established the NAECOB, which deals with the accreditations and equivalency of schools and the credentials they provide. And schools, big and small, are part of that. So for us, you know, for those parents who want to use a different model, we're not offended by that in any way. We see it as a really expanded choice to parents, and all we're concerned about is that that child, whichever modality they receive in their education, is indeed receiving an education suitable to them and an education of quality for them.
Excellent. You know, that's very important. But before we go any further, we have our own Lisa Bullard, who's here to share with us some education tidbits. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Thank you, Denise. The National Accreditation and Equivalency Council, NAECOB, is a statutory body established under the National Accreditation and Equivalency Council Act of the Bahamas on the 4th of October 2006, assented on the 29th of December 2006, and came into force on the 28th of February 2007. NAECOB is responsible for registering and accrediting primary schools, secondary schools, post-secondary schools, and any institution that offers training in the Bahamas. The National Accreditation and Equivalency Council of the Bahamas began operation in 2016 with a mission statement to be committed to providing quality assurance and a platform for shared values and practices through a process of self-evaluation and peer review to address the needs of students and the society. Back to you, Denise.
Thank you, Lisa, and welcome back. We are speaking with the Director of Education, Marcellus Taylor, who's giving us an overview of education in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, Director, many of our education institutions across the world have had to make adjustments due to COVID-19. Some of them have been canceling exams, postponing exams. Some of them have been altering their requirements for graduation. Some of them have been canceling admission examinations. What has your Department of Education been doing to make, I guess, adjustments to assist our students?
Well, we've been able to make adjustments as we see fit. But I will say that a prevailing notion for us is that we have to continue to provide opportunities for our children. And in providing those opportunities, we have to also ensure that the standard of the opportunity and the outcome is reflective, not just of the students who have worked in this particular cohort or this particular year, but also that there's still some level of consistency. That doesn't mean that we don't adjust things, because we have made adjustments. For instance, with the high school diploma, we've made adjustments around the number of credits that students require to graduate based on the situation on the ground. We've also made adjustments to things like whether they do the work study or even sometimes with attendance. We've also provided extra opportunity for students to do credit recovery or grade recovery. But there are certain things that we're not going to really compromise. So we're not going to compromise on the number of BJCs you need. 4 BJCs in those key areas to us is foundational. And because when a student walks away with a credential, it has to have a value. And that value has to be comparable, right? It's the same as if you get a $100 bill that is a counterfeit bill. That doesn't have the same value as someone with an authentic $100 bill. And we're not in the business of giving people credentials that have no authenticity, that have no value. And so we are aware of the situation. We make adjustments as we can, but we don't want people to get the sense that it's a free-for-all and that standards mean nothing. And so we've been encouraging our students to come up to the standard. We've been providing extra tuition and other ways to support students so they can meet the standards. And we encourage their parents and people in the community to support the students to make the standard, as opposed to looking for ways to, in a sense, dumb down what we're doing.
Excellent. And in terms of some of the requirements, I know that there have been questions about the attendance requirements, because obviously with COVID-19, there's been some inconsistency for some persons, a bit more challenges. How has that been adjusted?
Right, well, something like attendance, it's taken based on the number of available opportunities. So normally we try to get 180 days, but if we don't have 180 days of tuition, we can't expect the student to attend 180 days of classes. So we've made those relevant adjustments. But like when we're in virtual, students could and should still attend, and those who don't have devices, the mechanism is there for them to identify themselves to the school, go in and explain these things. Once you put your case forward, once it's a reasonable case, adjustments will be made. But we also know that there's students who are just not participating, who have the devices, who are elsewhere doing other things. They can't expect to get the credit or get the credential, and they haven't put the work in, nor have they identified that they've had a problem. So these are the kinds of things that we have to ensure that there's no loophole that people can jump through and unreasonably expect to receive this credential that has value.
Right. I know that we don't have an attendance officers with us today, but I remember back in the day there were what we call truancy officers that went out and looked into these matters. But what is the ministry doing? I know there's a walkabout to reach these students that are missing. In your opinion, what do you see going forth for to help alleviate the attendance issue?
Right. Well, we have attendance officers. We don't call them truant officers anymore, but the attendance officers more or less function in that similar role. Of course, maybe their presence doesn't seem as prolific because they're not in this particular uniform, riding on bicycles and whatever. But we're thinking that maybe we do need to heighten the awareness of their presence. And so we're looking at ways to do that. But we're also trying to utilize technology in the process. So we have the EMIS and the LMS, which log the attendance of students, and we will use and have been using that to identify students who have not been participating. And once we have that information, we have tablets and so forth, that the attendance officers could have the whole database of students who are supposed to be in school and those who are missing. where they live and go into their homes. The Minister of Education has formed a task force to look at this whole thing of students who are missing and how do we get them back in to ensure that they're participating. And you referenced the walkabouts, and we've had walkabouts all over this country geared towards the whole thing of identifying students and bringing them into the schools. And the approach that has been used with that is to also involve community-based stakeholders. So in addition to the school-based staff going out, the community-based stakeholders have become a part, and we'd like to thank all of them who have been part of it. And the Christian community has been a key part of that walkabout process. But we don't want it to be a one-off thing. Yes. We want people in the community, when they see students who are not engaged, we want them to, in the first sense, intervene if they can. But if they feel uncomfortable intervening directly, let it be known to the school, let it be known to the ministry, so that we can make the intervention and get the students back in and get them engaged.
Thank you, Director. Excellent. It is a community effort.
Sure.
Well, we now take our first break. You're watching Airtable Talk Unplugged as we speak with our Director of Education about instructional delivery in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. Stay with us.
Hey Shelly, what you saying, gal? I see you in a minute.
Yeah, I good. Give me 1 minute, let me take this call. Hello? Listen here, y'all need to stay from out that yard here and hurry up and clean the house before I get back. Goodbye. Sorry about that, gal.
Man, the gal that's your children you talking to? Why they in Richwood School? It's 11:45 in the morning. What happened? They ain't get no class today?
Shelly, one thing, but you always up in people's business. Listen here, I'm fortunate like you. I can't afford one device, let alone 3. Then the internet is be in and out and things. They ain't dead. They don't learn nothing on them computer, no way. The ministry need to open school back up face to face.
Gal, if you wasn't bigger than me, I would have cut your behind. First of all, I don't have it no better than you. The difference is, I can do what I need to do to make sure my children get their education. You think I rich? Gal, carry yourself and go to that school and tell them the children need their device. And internet off and on, that ain't no excuse. You know how much place around here the church and thing will let you use their space? And gal, stop talking food, cause I know you got family who the children could go by. Ain't nobody tell me that. I know that. Miss, get serious here before you ruin your children's life.
Shelly, like I say, you always up in people's business. But anyway, okay.
Welcome back to Airtable Talk Unplugged. We're speaking with Director Taylor, and now joining us is Dr. Lisa Rolle, the Executive Director of NAECOB. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Rolle. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Actually, my first question is to you. Now, I know that NAECOB is a regulatory institute, a part of the Ministry of Education, and there are a lot of parents right now that do not know about NAECOB, and I think that they need to, because they're considering putting their children in small, independent homeschool settings or in just small schools. What do you think parents ought to know if that is the alternative form of education that they're utilizing at this time?
Well, first of all, NAECOB is a statutory body that has been established by the National Accreditation and Equivalency Council of the Bahamas Act. And we have been charged with the responsibility of registering schools and regulating their status. That is important because once a school has been registered or recognized with NAECOB, it says that it had met a set of standards and that they are now qualified to offer their programs and courses. That is important for parents to know, because as they seek institutions to school their children, they would need to research to ensure that those schools have been regulated by NAECOB and they actually appear on our website. That will say to them that this school has been approved to give those offerings. Oftentimes, parents make the mistake of enrolling students in institutions that have not been registered with NAECOB, not to, or to find out later on that there are some inconsistencies, and then the complaints start. So that is the first thing I will say to them. Conduct your research, contact NAECOB to ensure that the school is qualified to do what they propose to do.
So if I'm a parent and I may have decided that, you know, I'm educated, I have my degrees, and I think that I will just start not only teaching my children, but maybe also if I have a few friends that I can bring them in as well and start a small little tutoring school. Is that okay? I mean, should I now just get my business license and open shop?
Well, it's a little bit more than that. If in fact you would like to tutor students, that's fine. However, the tutoring should not be conducted during regulated school hours. So whether the child is on online or hybrid form, they must be registered in a school that has been recognized by the Ministry of Education and of course registered with NAECOB. Now, if a parent decides to homeschool their own child, then of course that child would have to be registered with the homeschool unit at the Ministry of Education. During the pandemic, NAECOB has made a little adjustments to how parents can have their students schooled, ensuring that it is done using quality assurance methods. So if a family has students or relatives and they would like to have an instructor come in and tutor those students, a small school is acceptable. However, they must still be regulated by NAECOB, because it's important that once a child has completed their education, it's important to know that it's quality education that they would have received and they can actually use it for either employment or for higher education. So that parent or those parents would actually have to make application to NAECOB for small school, and of course they would have to actually go through a set of standards, pass a set of standards before they can be approved to offer their program.
Okay, so definitely, obviously, if I'm tutoring only my own child, that's fine. But once I bring other people in to the picture, then I need to find myself to NAECOB.
You need to find yourself to NAECOB because, you know, the process is not just registering you because you want to be. We have other government entities that we collaborate with to ensure that the space is safe to conduct instruction. So that is a major area as well.
So I guess like Ministry of Works,
Ministry of Works, Fire Department, Environmental Health, because the classroom setting has to be conducive to learning. The classroom setting may be your living room, however, it must be inspected to ensure that it's safe to provide instruction for that child.
And I'm assuming the police probably need a police certificate,
yes,
maybe?
The fire department.
Fire department. Okay, all right, excellent. So it's not just setting up shop, and that's good to know.
Yes.
Yeah, so that parents need to still visit your office to make sure that all the regulations are in place and all the T's are crossed.
Yes,
so
in addition to visiting, we also have a website where they can access information as well, and also the application form can be found on our website at naecob.org. But our telephone number is 328-887-203. They can contact us for further information.
Well, definitely. I want to now go back to the director. And of course, the director now, COVID-19, of course, we know that parents have decided, well, I'll homeschool. Some parents have decided I'm going to put them in a smaller setting. But for the vast majority of our students, thousands of them, they will be returning to our classrooms, to our public school classrooms. But there is a concern about a learning gap because of COVID-19. Some persons miss school. What are the plans for the Department of Education to help close this learning gap?
Well, first of all, in dealing with learning loss, we could surmise everything, but it's not until we actually test or assess that we'll know exactly what the scope of the problem is. So over the course of the last few weeks, schools have been providing opportunities through instruction and assessment activities to diagnose where students are. And once we've completed looking at where students are, then we could look at actually addressing the learning gap. And we basically intend to use the strategy to address the learning gap in two ways. One, through the regular instructional process, and then two, by extra tuition activities. And the regular instruction process is involved with students returning to the face-to-face campus, making sure that they have the exposure to the specific skills and contents that they need in order to, the key skills and concepts that they need in order to make good on the academic year, but also offering extra tuition activities so that they can catch up on areas that they may not have gotten or areas that they didn't get to the level that they should. We, in the past, have done that on two fronts. At the level of the school, where schools can do extra tuition activities after school on weekends, etc. And then also the ministry is going to provide some central support for revisional activities, especially for students in the grades that are impacted by national exams. And so this is the general approach that we will take. And as we move further into this and we understand more about what the gaps are, then if we need to, we'll make adjustments and bring in more resources or whatever we need to do.
Excellent, excellent. Well, that's good to know, because we know that thousands of students will be returning and we want to make sure they're brought up to speed. Well, it's time for our second break. And in our final segment, we will continue to address education protocols as we examine instructional delivery in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. Stay with us.
Log on and stay on. As parents, we will not always be present while our children engage in online learning. Ensure that your child is getting the most from the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training's Learning Management System. Here are some tips to help you establish your child's online learning routine. Number 1, designate a workspace to reduce distraction. The bed is not recommended. Number 2, each morning ensure your child is alert and devices are ready to log on. Number 3, periodically check in on your child by calling, texting, or FaceTiming to ensure that they are participating in their online classes. Number 4, communicate with your child's teachers to stay updated on your child's progress and online attendance. Number 5, remember, it takes a village to raise a child, so you can create a WhatsApp or other social media group with parents to share relevant information pertaining to your child's online education. Education is important. Log on and stay on.
Welcome back to our final segment of Ed Table Talk with Dr. Lisa Rolle, the Executive Director of NAECOB. We also have joining us is Mrs. Darlene Edwards. Mrs. Edwards is the coordinator of the homeschooling unit at the Ministry of Education. Thank you so much for being a part of the program, Mrs. Edwards.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. And thank you again, Dr. Rolle, for being here. Welcome back.
Thank you.
All right. Well, ladies, earlier we had the Director of Education on with us, and he started to talk a bit about homeschooling and how parents have considered that as an alternate form of engagement for their child's instructional delivery. And here, you're in charge of the homeschooling unit. I'd like you to elaborate with us and tell us a bit more exactly what is a homeschool.
A homeschool is a home where the parent and guardian decide to take over the responsibility of the instruction by to the child. Simply put, it is children or child home, parent home, and the parent teaches the child at home.
Now, your organization, homeschooling unit, of course, all parents may not be aware of it. They may have just decided, well, I know. They may think, well, the Education Act allows them to educate their children. I mean, we're not required to have our children in a school. We can teach them ourselves if we're able to. But what do you think the parents ought to do? I know you want them to register with you. Why is that important?
That is important because certain things can happen that you're not aware of, and parents are not aware of. First of all, that is your duty.
Well, Dr. Rolle, now I know that both the homeschooling unit and NAECOB are regulatory units. So you regulate what's going on. You want to make sure that everything is on point with instructional delivery programs. Now, tell me a bit about why do you think that parents ought to ensure that they come into NAECOB, get their students regulated? And I know the answer to one of them is these national exams, but I want you to expand on that for me.
Right. Well, what happens at NAECOB, parents won't necessarily contact NAECOB for regulation. That will be done by the homeschool unit. But oftentimes they would ask questions. And if the home school is not regulated, and what we have found with small schools is that if they're not registered, testing and evaluation would not know that they too exist and would not have information relative to the student. Therefore, when it's time to sit national exams, then the parent or the guardian will find that now they face a challenge because the students are not registered, so they're unaccounted for, in a regular private or independent school. But if you're homeschool and you're not known to exist, then it creates a challenge for the child. But Ms. Edwards would be able to expand a little bit more on that.
First of all, I'd like to say we can't regulate. You have student services, the truant officer and so on, to deal with that. Well, we have a problem with parents stating what a homeschool is. A lot of times we get phone calls and they would say, I want to send my child to a homeschool, which means they want to send a smaller school. The Act allows you to start at 5 students to start a small school. So you have parents who do this. They say, okay, I am going to have my child, and then I'm going to bring my sister child and my neighbor's child in. And they say, I could do that up to 4. Well, maybe they can because the Act says it's 5. Parents have to understand that you can't have different children. You have 4 children, but you have 1, 2, 3, 4 different children. That's a problem. So we usually send them to NAECOB to sort that out.
So what they're doing then, like you said, is they're starting their little small school rather, because
yes.
they have 4 children, 4 different parents or
Right,
guardians.
yes.
Right, so that's when your
right,
area
yes.
comes to NAECOB, and then you step in and you let them know what are the regulations that they ought to adhere to and so forth.
Yes.
Okay, very good. And what has been the response to that? Have you had pushback, or you found that for the most part persons to cooperate?
We have had not necessarily pushback, but more questions as to why, because it was a lack of understanding as to what a home school is versus a small school.
Excellent.
Oftentimes, once it is explained, they understand, and they now have to make the decision whether they want to proceed with developing a small school or they would regulate to homeschool. So oftentimes, once it's explained, they now understand, and it's incumbent upon them to make that decision.
Well, that's excellent. Well, would you believe it? We're running out of time. I mean, that went by. The time has gone by so quickly, ladies. It's certainly been a pleasure to hear what you have to say about our educational protocols for instructional delivery. So, thank you so much for being here. Well, that's all for now. I am Denise Pratt, and thank you once again for tuning in. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.